Thank you, Spencer, and our esteemed panelists for this morning's discussion on fostering equity in climate change and supply chain resilience. These are important conversations to take back to our own conservation districts to bolster our efforts to reach established, new, and underserved producers and get conservation on the ground to help us adapt to a changing climate. Please join me in thanking Spencer and all of our panelists for their time with us this morning. I'd now like to introduce our final speaker of the morning, Krysta Harden, President and CEO of the U.S. Dairy Export Council. Krysta has a strong background in agriculture, sustainability, and food policy. She became the first woman to serve as the U.S. Dairy Export Council's chief executive in 2021. Prior to this role, Krysta worked with Corteva Agriscience, the agriculture division of DuPont. She also spent nearly 7 years working with Secretary Tom Vilsack at the USDA. There, she helped shape agriculture policy, leading implementation of the 2014 Farm Bill. Before her time with USDA, Krysta was CEO of NACD for 5 years, providing national leadership for conservation and representing thousands of conservation districts across the nation. And if I will for a moment, just extend, when I first came into the board at NACD, Krysta was our CEO. And it wasn't long after that she left NACD to pursue her career at USDA. And Krysta, I can't say what a privilege it's been as a fellow woman in agriculture to watch you progress through various degrees, roles, and responsibilities, and you serve as an inspiration to all women in ag. Please join me in welcoming my friend, Krysta Harden, to the stage.
Whoa, I knew this was going to be harder for me. It's always emotional to come back to NACD. Jeremy did promise me the last word, and I learned in Washington, you want to be the last word, not necessarily the first. You want to be the last thing people remember. And I'm just so honored. Such good memories, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but I'm also going to talk about dairy and the importance of the dairy industry, why you're understanding what this industry is going through, its role in sustainability, how we need your help at the conservation district level as well as in RCS. There's so much to talk about, but I'm going to do a little bit first. We'll get to that. Just a snapshot of some pictures. I hope there are a couple people in the room who remember my time at NACD. I'm very excited for those who don't remember, frankly. It means, not because it was bad, but because there's been change and a lot of turnover, but there should be some faces that you recognize there. One is Billy Wilson. I don't know how it got the cowboy hat off of you, Billy, and it got an NRCS cap on, but Billy was vice chair when I was hired and my first full-term chair and still dear friend. We still stay in touch. In the middle and the bottom is me and my sister. We're planting a tree in honor of Olin Sims, who many of you will remember the name, who died when he was chair of NACD, and there were trees planted all over our country as a living legacy to his commitment to conservation. And we're on our farm in Mitchell County, Georgia, planting a tree. I'm there in a hard hat because somehow or another I became a construction site manager, whatever that means. When we renovated the office in Washington, I had no idea what I was doing, but I got all the right gear, so I looked important and could say yes and no and whatever. It was kind of fun. And then in one picture, you'll see me and Jeremy. He looks about 12. Jeremy, I'm not sure you were shaving at that point. I swear you look so young. But we were having floods in Washington. The drainage system didn't work around our office. And I called Jeremy and said, will you come help me put sandbags around our office or we're going to flood? It was raining cats and dogs, Jeremy, and there was water backed up everywhere. He comes and his poor car was sitting like this with so much sand in the back. But we got her done, and we saved the day. And I could not be more proud of Jeremy and his accomplishments. I just want you to know I brought him to NACD. He made a couple of detours, but I started his career with y'all, and we certainly have remained very close. He and his girls are dear, dear parts of my extended family. There's other pictures of people. Some of them you may recognize, some you don't, but it's just a snapshot of kind of my time at NACD and really kind of the beginning of my career in so many ways. It launched me to higher levels, to be able to be other CEOs, to be deputy secretary, to be a chief sustainability officer at a Fortune 500 company as I was at DuPont. All those things started because you and your predecessors hired somebody different, took a chance on somebody outside of your ranks that you didn't know so well, that maybe didn't look exactly like the people who were hiring me. I was the first female, I'm probably I guess the last. How scary. Not last forever though. But because you were bold and brave, invested in me, I have been able to do a lot of cool things. Thank you. Always remembering the things you taught me about wise use of our natural resources, always making sure that partnership was front and center, voluntary conservation matters most, and that farmers and ranchers and landowners cannot do what we expect them to do as consumers alone. They've got to have investment, they've got to have help, they've got to have support from a much broader relationship and partnership across all of agriculture and also the consuming public. I learned so many lessons. When people ask me if I've been to every state, I said I've given a speech in every state with conservation districts. I always had a home. I looked for those signs. I looked for the office to know where I could go to find friends and extended family to talk about conservation, to talk about our resources for people who cared. Just don't forget who you are and why, and remember to make sure you're grooming that next generation who's going to follow in your footsteps to invest in people like me basically 20 years ago. Be bold, be brave. All right, that's the sermon. Folks think you know dairy, and a lot of you do. It used to be that there was a dairy in every county, New York City, Cook County, Chicago. We don't have that anymore. They're more productive. They're sometimes smaller, sometimes bigger. Still, dairies in 96% of the U.S. households. We export the part that I lead in hundreds of countries around the world. We have 10 offices around the world selling great dairy products. But it's about the nutrition that's the core of what dairy is and why it still remains a vital part of our agricultural economy, still a part of the consuming diet. Here's some just numbers here just to make sure that you don't forget about the nutritional part of sustainable nutrition. I'm not going to read this, I think y'all can, but just to set the stage of who we are in dairy. We're also extremely diverse, and I think that is the strength of U.S. dairy because we have large dairies like here in California, Carlos, some of the biggest and the best in the world, frankly. I'm going to visit some while I'm over here on this side of the country. But we also have very tiny dairies in the U.S. My chair, a dairy farmer from Missouri, has 150 cows, farms with his dad and his brother and his niece. My vice chair farms in the valley in California. Her family, she and her brother run 7 or 8 dairies and about 3,000 cows. That's the strength of U.S. agriculture. We're not all alike. There's a lot of common threads, a lot of things that bind us to the land and the things that we love and care about, but we look different. We are different. We think differently. There's no two dairies, neighbor to neighbor, brother to sister, that are alike. I have found that. And it's the same way across agriculture. That is a strength that we should embrace. That is the strength that makes us different from the rest of the world and adds that extra plus, in my mind, that we have in agriculture. U.S. we produce about 11% of the milk supply, with only 3% of the cows. Productivity, efficiency, genetics, great farm work, the work that a lot of them do in conjunction with, frankly, NRCS and the Conservation District, They're good stewards first. They understand taking care of their cows, how they get their feed, where it comes from, how they manage their manure. All that matters, and that's why we can be so efficient. We are the most efficient in the world. We have the lowest GHG intensity. Everything that consuming public, the shareholders of our major sellers say they want to see the U.S. industry is doing. Also, it's a hungry world. Unfortunately, after the conflicts we've had across the world, food security or insecurity, frankly, is greater than ever in some very hot spots. It's sad to me to think today, in this world where we have such high production and efficiencies, there's still people that don't have nutrition, don't have the nourishment that they need. Even in my home county, in southwest Georgia, where we actually do have poverty, we have folks who don't have enough food, don't have the right type of food and nourishment. These are issues that we still have to deal with in U.S. agriculture and frankly in global agriculture. We still have to meet the demands. We still have to think about our natural resources. And I think conservation districts are often where those two things come together. How do we do both? How do we do both well? I think that's our challenge in U.S. agriculture. You can look at these numbers. I'm very proud of them, frankly. My first job at working in dairy, Secretary Vilsack recruited me to come lead the global environmental strategy for dairy because they were looking at what they'd done, their legacy of progress is what we call it, looking at all the great efficiencies, but also knowing you gotta keep changing, you gotta keep being improving. You can't just take a snapshot and say, check mark, we're done. That's why districts still exist today, because you always are changing and growing. That's exactly what the dairy industry felt, and I was brought on board to help lead. So we had to set goals. Had to be realistic about what we could do, and then also think about how we're gonna do it. It's not just enough anymore to say, I wanna be a good steward. I wanna reach these goals. I wanna do good things. You know that better than anybody. You're on the front line of these issues. The consuming public wants to know how you're gonna do it. And later on, we'll talk about how you're gonna measure it. I led the effort in 2020, March of 2020. That date may not ring a bell for you, but it was right in the beginning of COVID. And we were scheduled to have an innovation center for dairy, a group that brings all the CEOs of the major dairy companies and cooperatives in our country together. A loose group, there is no dues, it's just a group that meets and accomplishes a lot of things. That was the time that group was gonna decide, are we gonna set goals or not? It's a time when it would have been very easy for the industry and these CEOs to say, well, the world's turned upside down. We can't even travel to meet in person. Let's kick this can down the road. Let's not do this now. I thought, if I have to, I'm gonna lay it on the tracks. We are not kicking this down the road. Luckily, I didn't have to. I didn't get run over. I didn't get fired. In fact, by a roll call vote, it's so funny when I think about it, that we couldn't meet because people were not traveling those early COVID days. We didn't really use Zoom very much yet, which is kind of the good old days in some ways. We had a phone call, and every CEO of major dairy companies, the companies you know, like Land O'Lakes, like Dairy Farmers of America, the biggest dairy co-op in the world, Schreiber Cheese, La Prina Cheese, biggest mozzarella company in the world, down the list. Hillmar, one of the biggest companies in California, I'm going to see tomorrow. It was not just we're going to say yes or no to set these goals. It was a roll call. CEOs had to be on record putting their company, their farmers for the cooperative on record to say, this is what we pledge we're going to do. It gives me chills, kind of gets me teary sometimes to think about those leaders taking that chance in a time when the world was so uncertain, so scary for many of us. The unknown of what we were going to be dealing with as a population, as a global population, for those CEOs to have the mindset to say, our planet matters too. And our role as U.S. dairy matters. We are not going to be deterred. We're not going to be scared away from doing what we know is right. We are conservationists. We are good stewards. We care about wise use of our natural resources. And every single CEO voted yes. Now, I'm sure they went home wondering, what in the heck have I done? As they started looking at really what this means. There are ways that we're going to get there. There are pathways that we've got to take. And I think that every CEO understood and that this was a collective effort, something that I learned from districts. Things that we can do collectively better than we can do individually, that it's going to take all of us and more. There is no exactness. We don't know exactly how. And every farmer may not do everything, but collectively, we can get to GHG neutral. You look at where our outputs come from our feed. Many of you may not have dairy cows, but I bet some of you are growing feed for your neighbors who do, somewhere in the country or in the county. Enteric, methane is a huge focus for the world. 35% of that from the cows is very difficult. Of course, manure management and then energy. Those are the areas we have to have a plan for it, how to address, how to decrease, how to make sure they are controlled and managed. Major investments, major partnerships, technology improvements. It still has to be affordable so that the farmers can stay on the farm. That's the other equation that so many folks don't understand that you do, and I know that you do. It has to pencil out. It can't just be good for the consuming public. It has to keep the farmer on the land, or why are we doing it? We should not be putting farmers and ranchers out of business if we want to be doing the right things. We've got to give them the tools and support to make sure they can. We also in the dairy industry recognize that it doesn't just end at the farm gate. Our processors also have to be committed, also have to help us deal with very, very significant issues. GHG, circularity, water, packaging, there's so many different things. We had to bring all this together in our industry. The first industry in the US to do this. Others are trying to follow, but I will tell you, dairy stuck its neck out for a lot of reasons. Not that they're any better stewards than any other farmers, but there's such consuming, facing, frontline relationship with the buying, purchasing public. The expectations are higher. You're facing your consumer every day you go to the milk case or you buy cheese or ice cream, which is a separate food group in my house. It used to be that we got away with it, and I'll say we got away with it. I worked on a lot of farm bills. I did a lot of speeches. I talked a lot about what we believe in and what we do in agriculture. You can't just do that anymore. You got to measure it. You got to prove it. You got to have data. We talked about the last panel, data management, so important, so critical. It cannot just be anecdotal. You can't just say, I'm a farmer, I'm a rancher, I'm a landowner, I do the right things, I care about the land first. I was an original environmentalist. All that sounds good, but it does not really matter if you can't prove it. That's what we're trying to do. It's making sure that we measure, that we know what our investments are, the return of those investments. Very, very difficult to do, and frankly, it's very scary for a lot of our dairy farmers and dairy owners. They are worried about who gets that data, who's going to control that data, how do we share that data? Is it aggregate, or is somebody from Washington going to come, or some other foreign capital going to come to me and ask for more? But we also know farmers have proven to us that it's really critical we do this and we do it right and we own it. We're not told what to do. It's not regulated by someone, that we're doing it ourselves in partnership with our governments, in partnership with outside third-party entities. You see a lot of effort being put into measuring and reporting. All right, next steps. I don't know if anybody here, I probably can't see because those lights are bright, but has anybody ever been to the conference the UN Conference for Climate, COP. Anybody ever gone? I don't see anybody. Well, I have several times. Why would I go? Just because it's in an exotic location somewhere around the world, hard to get to, with a lot of people from every country in the world beating up on agriculture, beating up on the U.S. often. Because I have always believed, been taught by many of you, and believe wholeheartedly, you have to be at the table. You have to be driving the decisions. You have to help drive the dialogue. You have to be there. Because when you're not, somebody else is. When you don't define who you are, your competitors are, or the naysayers are. So U.S. Dairy has been very interested of making sure we were leaders on a global stage, that we just don't talk to ourselves and folks who understand and believe us and agree with us. We go where it's hard. We go where it's not friendly, where there are protesters, where there are people who challenge every speech I give, who don't trust me, who don't believe in the commitment from U.S. agriculture to be good stewards, who believe in conservation, who believe and that we are going to invest and make the right decisions. Methane is the one reason we have to be there, because the rest of the world is focusing on methane, and we know that we will be part of the solution and not just the problem. We have to be. There's other issues at every one of these COP meetings that are U.S. agriculture is front and center. And it's not just that I go, it's a hired person representing our industry. Your neighbors go, your U.S. dairy neighbor farmers, they go. They go there when it's tough. They go when people don't agree with them. They go when people call them out. They go in front of the protest. They go arm in arm with the U.S. government officials who back us up, who support what we do, who help us find the tools and the resources, help us make the investments. But if you know a dairy farmer, thank them for what they're doing, for being bold, for being brave, for sticking their neck out, for taking sometimes the arrows for the rest of agriculture. This past year in Dubai, we had more U.S. farmers than we've ever had, not just dairy farmers. But maybe some of your friends and neighbors were there too with other organizations. We were there in force, and we will be next year. Next year is in Azerbaijan. That's not a name I say very often, a country I have not been to. I've been to almost 100 countries. This will probably be about 97, 98. But we're all building up for what's going to happen in Brazil the following year. And I encourage you to think about what is the message from U.S. agriculture, not just dairy, but U.S. agriculture in general. How do we relay to the rest of the world who we are, what we stand for, where our investments are, and what matters to us? How do we make sure that the good work that you are doing, where it matters the most in my mind, at the local level? How do we work together to make sure those messages are heard, that are understood, that are appreciated, and that are trusted? Now, some of you are going to say, why do I care what happens at a UN meeting? Why do I care that happens in a country I absolutely not even sure I can find on the globe? Who cares about the rest of the world? Does it really matter? I care about my farm, my ranch, my little town, my community. For me, it's Camilla, Georgia, Mitchell County, mom and daddy, my sister. Because I care about them. Because I care about the next people who I want to farm our farm. That's why I care about the rest of the world. We're in this together. It's not just Camilla and Mitchell County anymore. Maybe it was for my great-grandparents. Maybe my grandparents, but I don't think so. I know my daddy couldn't farm that way. We sold peanuts. For those who do know me know that I grew up on a peanut farm in southwest Georgia. When I asked my daddy who he grew peanuts for, he used to say, for the buying point. That's the first point of sale in peanuts. I said, Daddy, you're really selling it to that parent you hope is going to, buy some peanut butter. That's who you really are selling it to. And he said, yeah, and then the more he farmed and the more he thought about it, he understood. I'll tell you why, is in the dairy industry, I have to care about the rest of the world. When the organization that I'm the president and CEO of was formed 28 years ago, we exported about 3% of US production. We're still in 96% of the households in the US, but our population is stagnant. It's growing very, very little. And our production is 7 or 8, 9 tenths what it used to be. We're very efficient, we're very productive, we have more product than we know what to do with, and I bet if you grow soybeans, you've heard this same argument, or pick another crop. We are dependent on the rest of the world, who actually needs us too. I know it's time, I'm hurrying. I warned you that I'm long-winded. We now export almost 20% of what we produce, and we produce a lot more dairy. And it's not that we're pushing products on people that they don't need. The world needs nourishment, as I mentioned earlier. It needs products from the US. We need that partnership. That's what trade's about. It's a partnership. We use that word a lot in this room, but there are other kinds of partnerships as well. So that's why we go to the UN. That's why we go to Rome. It's why we go to COP. That's why we go other places. It's why the work you're doing does not stop at your county or your district, your state, or the US borders. The collective work we do matters to all of us, and it matters to the world. So with that, thank you, and again, thank you for the warm welcome. It's always good to be back home. Appreciate it.